Welcome to Viva La Visionary, the podcast that celebrates the innovative ideas and mindsets of entrepreneurs and visionaries. Join your host, Coach Bob Schittefeld, as he dives into inspiring stories and practical insights from trailblazers who are changing the game. Whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur or a seasoned leader, this show is your source for motivation and creativity. Let's embark on this exciting journey together.
Hi there, Coach Bob, the founder of the Visionary Forum and host of Viva La Visionary, our podcast to, for, from, and about visionaries. Very excited to have Shelby Scarbrough here today. Shelby, how are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
Better now that we're talking. All right, well, cool. Well, I like to start off with a simple question, Shelby. Why are you on this planet?
Socialism, I love it. The first thing in the morning. I haven't had breakfast yet. I'm on the
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you're 3 hours behind.
Yeah, exactly. To be honest, that's something I actually look at pretty frequently. It isn't an easy question because, I think I'm here for my family and friends. But, what are we here for? To make a mark, to leave an imprint, to not leave an imprint? I don't know. I think those are all really good questions.
No, that's great. And I know you've done a lot as an entrepreneur and for entrepreneurs. I want to start briefly with EO, or formerly YEO. You've done a lot with EO. Can you tell me a couple? I know you've done a lot.
Sure. It's almost 30 years, I think, ago
Right.
that I started. And my sister actually got me involved because she was involved with the Hawaii chapter. She was a member of the Hawaii chapter before I even knew what EO was.
Right.
And she told me about it. And then I met some people in the DC chapter who were in the DC chapter, Marsha Rawls, Michael Byrne, a few other people, and they got me involved in the DC chapter. So from there, I became president of WEO at the time.
Oh, right. Yep.
Of our chapter because I was already or old, as they would say. And then pretty soon thereafter, I kind of, got involved with what we call global leadership. And we had more of a, I don't even know if wide or flat, I don't know which it is, but there weren't as many opportunities in leadership along the way. And so I ended up kind of on the trajectory for the global board in short order. And I ended up as global chair, which was probably one of the highlights of my career for sure.
And you have many of them, but yeah, so I knew that you were one of the global chairs, which is amazing. And I know a couple of them, obviously. So that is amazing. So thank you for your time and energy, because I've been in EO for 30 years and was on the local chapter board and then regional. I chose not to go that far, but I appreciate those of you who have. And I've got so many questions for you, but so then tell me a little bit about the Global School for Entrepreneurship, because I know that's another thing you're doing for us entrepreneurs.
Absolutely. In fact, that grew out of a task force that EO asked myself and George Gann and a few other, and David Galbensky, David Nilsson, a few other people to get involved with and have a look at how we could accredit EO learning. EO is a learning organization. I always call it a network, not a networking organization. So what we do is we help people learn and grow. That's what the organization's mission is. So education is at the core of that. And EO wanted to know how they could get academic credit for its members. And so we figured it out. We broke the code and figured out how to become accredited. And then we presented it to the board. And then literally the next day, I'll never forget, we were at the Reagan Library, which is very near and dear to my heart, for a board meeting. And what ended up happening is the COVID literally took over the world the next day and the whole world shut down. And it was such a new initiative and such a far-reaching and broad vision that it just couldn't be taken on board by the board at that time. And I totally get that. But we said, we've sort of figured this out. And as a business person, the opportunity that we could see, to use the visionary words, we could see the opportunity slipping by if we didn't take advantage of it. So we worked it out with EO that they didn't mind if we took it private. So Dave Galbensky and I operationalized it, and we've been working on it ever since. So it's been an interesting journey trying to create a whole new college. We created a whole new college for entrepreneurs to get their master's degree and now their PhD or DBA in business, when a lot of entrepreneurs don't have an opportunity to do that because they jump right into being entrepreneurs and kind of sometimes even bypass the undergraduate. So we give credit for lived experience. If you have 7 years of business experience of your own business or a key executive at a senior level for a number of years, 7 or 8 years, then we can give you credit for that and admit you even if you do not have an undergraduate degree.
That's awesome. And I know for me as a visionary, I did not like school, the way school is set up in the agricultural age. So I love and I've witnessed and been a part of some of the things that you teach. And it's so hands-on. And a lot of people ask me, like, where'd you learn? It's like, just by doing and failing a lot of times. So I love what you've created. How does someone get a hold or look into the Global School of Entrepreneurship?
It's www.gse for Global School of Entrepreneurship, gse.
Awesome. Love it. So I can get a MBA or a PhD as an entrepreneur. I love it. And from a student perspective and from a teaching perspective. So love that. So tell me what else. I know you've done about 80 other things in your life. So I know you've written a book or two and you're writing some more. And I know you've had other successful businesses. So in a couple minutes, kind of fill me in on a couple of the other things other than just EO and the Global School of Entrepreneurship.
Sure. I wrote a book called Civility Rules, and that was based on kind of the life experiences that I had and a philosophy that I came out of it with working in the Reagan White House and the Reagan State Department. It inspired and then the culture today of this sort of culture of incivility in the world. And so it's been a 15-year project that kind of has become more and more front and center, so to speak, in our culture. So I guess I picked a topic that I could see that there was something coming and that it was a topic that needed further discussion. So I created what I call the purposeful practice of civility. So the idea behind that is that a lot of people, when you talk to people about civility, one of the first things they say is, oh, that person is so uncivil. This person, if only they were better. And I just kind of came to the conclusion that, think about it. If you your employees, your family members, your spouse, your children, whatever it happens to be, to try to change them is kind of hard.
Yes.
And so the way that I approached it was to say, here's a practice for me to practice. And I hope that creates a ripple effect with anybody that I cross, that I counter. And, it's hard. It is really hard because sometimes you just want to scream. Sometimes you just want to lose it. Sometimes you don't want to be civil. We're in a grumpy mood or whatever it is. I get it. But this is the point, is to look at ourselves individually and do what we can to bring civility to this world. And the more people who do it, the more civil the world will be.
Right. I love that. And so when you did a presentation in the Visionary Forum, and I learned when you first mentioned civil and civility, I'm like, okay, fine. But it is so amazing that I'm often so driven on the future and passion and speed, and it's just so a lot of what I've learned from you is just to slow down and listen and be civil and be polite and be true. So I love your message. That's awesome.
Well, and I'm kind of a get to the finish line kind of person too, and so it's hard. Part of my practice is I have to dial it back and recognize that I've got to get people to come along with me, because you can't do much alone ultimately. And if you do, it's a lonely process, and I don't like working alone. So, it behooves me to go try to get people bought in. Would be a business term to this, to my way of thinking, or at least that I have compassion and empathy and understanding for theirs. And so that brings us together, closes that gap, that communications gap that happens so often, and hopefully we make baby steps.
And like you said, you probably saw a need for it before. As a society, we really need it.
Originally I wrote a chapter for a book called The Power of Civility. And the book was more about sort of image makers, image consultants and things, who told people how to tie their scarves, or the etiquette of eating, dining, executive dining, and things like that, which are actually, especially the dining etiquette and the social etiquette I think is really important. It's what I call courtesy in my book. And it's a layer of manners. Manners is a part of that, right? It's just one part. So this book was more about manners maybe, but my chapter was about political civility. And they had given me the opportunity, because I have an international background, so they'd given me the opportunity to write about international civility or political civility. And I had done so much international work that I thought, well, let me take on this political side of things, because that also is in my
brave.
And what I wrote in the end was, I basically could have said, you know what, there's no such thing as what I
conclusion.
Political civility is an oxymoron, and it goes back way, way, way back, even to people that we think of as great statesmen, like President Abraham Lincoln, who's actually a personal hero. I mean, I think he's an amazing legend and not in our time, but long before our time, and who set the stage for many great things. But if you really get into the politics of it, it was very uncivil in his time, and he was just as much a part of the hash slinging and the mud slinging as anybody else.
Right. No, I love it. And very interesting. And then, so who are a few examples of civil people? And I know you've worked with some people that many of us have heard of. So yeah, give us a few examples of who they are and why you would deem them civil.
Yeah, I did have the really great privilege. I worked, of course, with Ronald Reagan as he was my first boss in a way, working in the White House and the State Department for him, traveling around the world with him. He couldn't have been a more civil person. I mean, really, I didn't know what that word meant at the time. I guess I did know, but I didn't even think of it because it just was. And how he approached everything, individuals in his office, people that came to visit, and his dealings with other world leaders. It didn't mean he wasn't tough when he needed to be. I mean, it's not about not standing your ground.
Right.
Civility isn't just rolling over. Civility is having it be a place where people can communicate together and keep conversation going, keep the dialogue going.
Right.
And so as long as you can do that, being tough is okay. I think especially in foreign affairs, we've got to set some boundaries, right? But at the same time, it's about having that ongoing dialogue and having people able to you can step away from the table as a negotiating tactic because that's very effective, but to be able to come back, leaving the door open to come back is what's important. So I think that the next one I really probably could talk about is Nelson Mandela, who was my very first client when I left the State Department and the White House. I started a business called Practical Protocol, and it was all about implementing the logistics for dignitaries, and it was all the practical aspects of life, making sure they could get from here to there to do what they needed to do. So I took away all the noise from these dignitaries, all the noise around what we all mere humans have to do on an everyday basis, like think about how we're getting somewhere, make sure there's gas in the car, what door are we going in, where do we park, all those silly things that take up time and literally energy away from us. I did that for these dignitaries so that they could do the focused work that they needed to do that was very, very big. And so Nelson Mandela was one of those people who had just come out of prison after 27 years in prison, really pretty wrongfully imprisoned, in prison, political prisoner. And how he came out of it was really magnificent, and the epitome of civility, the epitome of dignity, respect, honor, trust, all of the elements that I talk about in the book. And one of my favorite lines that he has I used recently was somebody who was sort of pushing on me to say only certain people are worthy of being treated civilly. If they do what I think they should do, then they get my treatment of civility. And that's a completely the opposite way that I look at this. In fact, it's like the most uncivil people, if we treat them civilly and keep our boundaries, it's not about being rolled over, then we've kept our own dignity, our own humanity, our own standards up, and are putting that out in the world and not falling prey to doing the same thing in return, right? Treating like behavior. So Nelson Mandela's phrase for that was, having vengeance and anger. And this was all about, people saying, how could you be so kind to your oppressors, essentially? He said it's like swallowing poison and hoping the other person dies. So taking on the anger, the revenge, the negative aspects of what was done to you is only going to poison you further. And he did not believe in that, and neither do I. So he taught me a lot in that respect. And he was very kind and gracious, as you can imagine, to work with.
Well, and as you were talking about Nelson Mandela, I started to get anxious imagining how I would have felt, and I would have had anger and vengeance. And so civility probably isn't just when things are going well.
No, in fact, we don't need it when they're going well. There's no who cares because we're all getting along. It is civility in a way, but it isn't. That's the end result of civility. The civility, the work, the real work is when it's not good. Right.
No, I love that. Very cool. So would you consider yourself a visionary?
It's funny you say that. I think I've come to own it. I think of it as a big word, as a little self-centered, like it's not humble. If I feel like I'm not very humbled to say I'm a visionary, because I think that word is so amazing and so big and so encompasses so many things. But really pragmatically, and that's what I get to, and so much of what I do is the pragmatic, practical aspects of things, is I guess I am, because I've always felt a little out of my element wherever I was. And in many cases, I thought I was just not seeing it the right way. But what I come to understand is I do have a little bit of ability to anticipate and see ahead, and not in absolutely everything, but there are definitely things that I can go back to that I knew I look back to and I was ahead of my time on, and
Yep.
sometimes that's a little bit of a curse because you can fail because you're putting yourself out there for failure more often
Yes.
if you pursue the goals, because
Right.
again, it's about bringing people along with you. A lot of times other people aren't there, and it's not that they're dumb. It has nothing to do with that. It's that they're focused on a different part of the world than you are. And so I've come to understand that. Another way I've come to think about it is that when I realized I was a nonlinear thinker, it was like mind blowing. And when that really happened to me, I mean, I was coming to understand it, but when it really was solidified was when I went to the owner president managed program at Harvard. And to be honest, it wasn't the Harvard learning, which was fine. Of course, it's Harvard. So it's all very interesting, well-respected academic teachings. But the very first day is when my mind was like opened up into this freeing place, which was this woman named but she has a beautiful French name and I'm blanking on it right now. Anyway, she's this really nice lady, and she spoke to our cohort right the day before and gave us taught us a tool to take notes and to how to absorb this. And here's a new way of thinking about it. And it was mind mapping.
Right. Yep.
And what I realized is I am a nonlinear thinker. So that's how it kind of came out to this, is that when I was so you draw pictures, and I'm not an artist by any stretch of the imagination. I can hardly draw a stick figure, but I went out that day after the class and I bought two sketchbooks.
Okay. Right.
They were blank, no lines. And I turned them horizontally. And when I went into class, I started drawing pictures. So my entire experience at Harvard, this over 3 years, it was 3 years, 3 weeks a year for 3 years. So each time we were on campus, I would take these notepads, and I have all these pictures of the case studies. And so I find that I can follow that more easily. And yet I hold that up to somebody else, and somebody who's a linear thinker just their head wants to explode because it's confusing. Well, for me, it's not confusing. And so I realized the visionary aspect of this for me is also visual, is also something that you see. I mean, the terminology is about being able to see. And so for me, I have to see it, and it's a picture that's painted. And so that's how I now work when I want to get something out really quickly, is I mind map it. I don't worry about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Right.
Then my notepad is messy because I have arrows, and I end up mind mapping anyway. So that was my big aha, and that was late in life. That was 10 years ago. 10 years ago this month.
Oh, well, congratulations. So I hear, anticipate and see around the corner, bring people along, non-linear. I wrote down artists, but you said vision and see things. So those are some of the roles that we have as visionary. Anything else that you would throw in there? I mean, that's a lot. Maybe being civil. Any other roles as a visionary?
I'm exploring that because the next book that's coming out very soon I was calling it Pioneers, and so we're
interesting.
But in the process of our work together, my editor, they came back to me, and so we're changing the name a little bit, but the essence is the same, which is to think about people who do things first, people who are out there in front, so visionaries. So the idea that I realized that when we wrote a book about my grandfather called Undaunted, which is, he was the first aviator to attempt to fly solo around the world. Not the first American, but the first aviator to attempt, to fly solo around the world. So we wrote this book about him, and he was a pioneer. He was a pioneer aviator. That's his title, essentially, in history. And so then I started realizing, like the people I've talked to you about today, that I have worked with a lot of pioneers, a lot of visionaries, a lot of people who are out there in front. And so, yes, I have now kind of accepted that I think I kind of am one of them in one way, but I have never done anything quite as big and amazing as the people that I've worked with. So I've always sort of capped my own description of that, because I'm like, I'm not them. I'm not like them, but I am in a subless. So if you take, let's just put that down to real human beings, right? We can all be visionaries in a way. If I agree. We choose to. And if we look at the world with an open mind and an open heart, and without crushing our own and letting that voice inside our head crush us and say, oh, that's not real, that's not pragmatic, don't do that, you're going to risk this. I mean, these are the things that come into play, are these elements. So what I did with this next book that's coming out is I took all the stories of all the people that I've worked with, the Nelson Mandelas, the Reagans, and then I included people I was related to, like my grandfather, and then even all the way back to the Mayflower. My heritage goes back to the people who came over on the Mayflower, and they were visionaries. I mean, they were pioneers. They were out there way ahead of their skis, so to speak, and risked life and limb, quite literally, to try something new. So while I don't put myself in quite that risk pile, I do have the DNA in a way of that, and I'm trying to embrace it and own it, and I'm trying to help others see the potential in themselves through these stories of both extraordinary and in some ways ordinary people that I've worked with and friends with, et cetera. And I even include a friend of mine who I actually have the honor of being the officiant at his son's wedding this coming weekend, is Guy Fieri. So he's an old friend of mine. I've met him on a plane 15 years ago, and we've been friends ever since. And so he's included in the book because he's a visionary in so many ways, and he doesn't get the credit, I think, that he deserves for that, because it's not world peace. But look, bringing people together around a meal is not insignificant. It's actually something that we talk about that is missing from culture these days.
Right. Breaking bread. Yeah.
Breaking bread together. And so what he's done in the business community, small business, entrepreneurial, mom and pop restaurant community through diners, drive-ins, and dives to me is astounding. There is something called the Fieri effect, and it's very, very real, that when he goes to some place and puts his mark, his imprimatur on that restaurant thrives.
Right.
So he has moved markets essentially in his work. And I talk about all sorts of people like that. And then a lot of people that you don't know the names of that I believe that are visionaries, pioneers in their own right and should be celebrated.
Love it. So when you and I first started speaking a few months ago, I thought the book was kind of titled Pioneering. So do you have a new title, or is that not ready to be divulged?
Yeah, well, actually, I'll probably save that. It's let's just say that we're going more in the realm of legends, which is sort of in the same vein.
Love it.
Same vein.
Interesting. Very cool. So what's something that you've learned over the years, either personally or professionally, that has helped you as a visionary, kind of catapult you to the next level? That it's like, boy, once I realized this, or once I did this, it really helped me to be not successful, but feel great and move you forward as a visionary. Any wisdom share, experience share?
The one that comes to mind is so simple and silly, but I always say it when I give speeches. I talk about it as saying, well, it's because I am where I am because I hate salami. Principle. And that's it. When I volunteered, first of all, I volunteered. I went out of my comfort zone. I was actually I am sort of a shy person in some ways, and I've had to persevere past the shyness to be able to walk up and shake hands and introduce myself to people and be assertive. And that's most people who know me don't think that that's a problem. It is a challenge every time, even to this day. But way back when, in my early 20s, I volunteered after I graduated from college. Was at UCLA, and I was looking for a job. It was in the summer, and I volunteered while I was looking for a full-time job on the Republican convention in Dallas, Texas in 1984. And that was a turning point for me, because I'd been knocking on doors trying to get a job, and I was trying to sell myself. You're supposed to, when you talk to people about jobs, which first of all, entrepreneurs, a job, I mean, I don't know what that is anymore, but at the time, when you're trying to sell yourself to a potential employer, you do want to speak in their language. You do want to kind of anticipate what it is their needs are and be able to rephrase or phrase what you do in those terms so that you have to draw the picture for them in many cases, right? Make it easy for them, because if you come in with your visionary self and start talking in language that isn't theirs, then they're not going to get it and they're not going to hire you. All right. So I was trying hard and I realized that I was trying hard to fit into their box, whether it was a stockbroker or an ad exec or a product manager with a big company like Nestle or something like that, Carnation, all these ones I was interviewing. But deep down, I think that it was obvious probably that wasn't what I was meant to do. So in a way, it was good that I didn't get those jobs, but it was good experience. But when I volunteered on this campaign or the convention, I was painting signs. I was a youth volunteer. I was one of 2,000 people. And they brought in these box of salami sandwiches that were all stacked like 2,000 high, literally, in a big, huge box. And it was horrible. They were smashed and they were disgusting.
Right.
And I didn't like salami anyway. And my mother used to have to toast the bread when I went to school because I didn't like regular bread because it was soggy. So it's stuck in the top of your mouth and all these things. I hated that. So I said, I'm not eating this. But what are you going to do? Idle hands, right? And so I had learned from my parents, who started with Burger King franchisees when I was about 15, and they did it for 40 years and ended up with, at one point over 100 restaurants. So starting in the first restaurant that when I was in high school, I learned idle hands, are not acceptable. And so if you don't have something to do at that moment, if you're not making a sandwich for somebody at that moment, find something else to do, clean something, help somebody else at their station, restock something, whatever. Get busy.
Right.
So I thought that kind of instinct then had been drilled into me and kind of kicked in. And I walked around the other side of the table and started handing sandwiches out with the organizers, with the people who were in charge.
Right.
And I didn't know it at the time, but that was the trigger to everything, because I was noticed. I was helpful. I was then relied upon. I became the go-between between the people who were organizing it and my peers. So all of a sudden my status was elevated, and the opportunities that came from that were amazing. I was offered, I ended up working on the campaign when they came to California, the president came to California. Then I was asked to work on the inaugural committee, and from the inaugural committee, the White House, the State Department, and that was just it never stopped.
That's awesome. And I love interviewing people because people come up with different words for things, but I love volunteer, get busy, or get noticed, be noticed. Those are great, because I think not only do I love working with visionaries and helping each other to elevate, but it's helping, like you mentioned, everyone have vision. A lot of times it's like, what's your vision for your role? What's your vision for your life? What's your vision for school? Whatever it might be. And most people are like, what are you talking about? It's okay to think about it, and it's okay if it doesn't work out the way we think, but volunteer, get noticed. I love that. And I think that's an opportunity that we have as visionaries, is to help others to kind of have vision. What does it look like? But so any other comments around that?
We have a mutual friend, I think, Winnie Hart, who has a program. She has a book called Stand Out. And I mean, they do, she and her sister do amazing work. And I think in this case, I stood out because I was earnest in my efforts, and I was anticipatory. I was thinking about what was needed and making myself useful to those people at the time. So standing out wasn't about standing up and saying, hey, look at me.
Right.
It was, how can I help you? So it's putting yourself in the position of being useful to somebody else. And I find that it's an interesting dilemma even today, because I find myself going above and beyond, and I get pushback from people in my life, like, why are you doing that for them? Why are you doing this? Why are you going to those lengths? And in a way, I'm like, I don't know. It's just me. I just have to I want to do it. And it was the training thereafter at the White House of thinking you had to be on your toes. You had to think perfection was basically the expected standard, or that, you can't, much less was not acceptable. You didn't keep your job if you were too off. Right. And so you had to rise to the occasion. You had to get out ahead of it. You had to think ahead all the time. What's going to happen? What do I need to be prepared for? How do I anticipate something? So what we did was write President Reagan's schedule, and we wrote it to, we were the advanced team, and his schedule was line by line. It was every 5-minute increments, maybe even less sometimes. We broke it down to that, just 5 minutes. And so every detail, you had to visualize it. You had to envision what was going to happen, picture it, paint that picture. After walking, you go through a walkthrough. Now you have to come back and interpret that for the senior staff and for the president, because they take that document and they use it as their script, as their guide to know what's going to happen in the future. So now you think, okay, we're all done because we've planned this all to the nth degree with the whole team that's in the field, myself, I had three other colleagues who did the same job, and we were always on different clients, so to speak, on different projects. And then what would happen is life happens. Even with the president of the United States, there are twists and turns to every story. So it very rarely went exactly as planned. Often it went pretty close to as planned. And the things that could change might have been, let's say the weather came up and the flight's delayed because they have to wait for weather. So then you have to communicate what's happening in real time. But if you've got your script there, if you've got your anticipated vision of what's going to happen, of what you intend to happen, then you can jump to that script and adjust. If you have nothing, it's chaos.
Right.
So in a way, the visionary, the underappreciated visionary, because sometimes we push people to think of things before they want to.
Right. Interesting.
The benefit of that is if you look ahead, then you can adjust everything if you've got the plan. If you have no plan, then everything is chaos and there's no adjustment. It's just reaction. And that's so that I live by that. I have trouble with that to this day because I have pushback from people when I come into an organization. There are people who don't want to look that far ahead or can't or their eyes haven't been opened. And my job in those instances is to help them see I'm not a threat. I'm here to help them. I want them to see a vision of the future, to get ahead of something so that then you can adjust and reposition without being reactionary, without it being emergent in panic and emergency. It's like, okay, here, this is exactly what's happening. One time I was with we had the Prime Minister of Japan, and they were at lunch at the State Department. It was first visit of George Bush, and so it was a whole new team. It was all of Bush's people were now in charge of the protocol office, et cetera, and I was kind of the lone protocol officer holdover to help with the visit, to be in charge of that visit, because I was the only one who had the legacy of knowing how it all worked, even though they were all intelligent, smart people. And the chief of protocol I could see that there was conversations going on. I said, okay, look, I can help you make anything happen. I just need to know what you're trying to accomplish. So look over here. I've got the keys to the kingdom here. Just include me, because they're all talking amongst themselves. And what they revealed was that the president, who had been the Treasury Secretary, and the Prime Minister, who had also been the Treasury Minister of Finance before, wanted to go over to the meetings that were with Treasury ministers who were all over at the Treasury Department. That wasn't in the script.
Right.
It was James Baker who wanted to do that. All right, so they wanted to go over there because James Baker was Secretary of State, right? So he wanted to go over there. So they were old colleagues, wanted to go see them. Well, it seems like no big deal. Let's just jump in the car and we'll go to Treasury before you go to Blair House and go on with your day and end up at the White House. Well, that's a major shift when you've got a motorcade and security and people going in different directions, and you've got 200 people who have to know that information. Right. So I was the conduit for that. That's what I'm saying. Talk to me, because I can make all this happen. One call and I can get it done, but I need to know. So they said, okay, well, we want to do this. So we want to, but we had to split the motorcade. Okay, so that was because some people were not going to go. It was just them that was going to go, and the other people were going to go to Blair House. I mean, it was all this stuff that had to happen in like 15 minutes because the lunch was ending. And so I said, yeah, okay, give me 10 minutes. So we got it done. So we had radios, but we didn't have cell phones or texting at that time. So I'm up and down in the elevators, backstairs, this and that, talking to the people on the ground, out at the motorcades, because we didn't have radios that talked to each other, all these different things. So I'm running around, yes, but I'm like a swan, graceful, but in my mind, I'm doing it at a quick pace. Okay. Right. Change. You got it. Okay, and I came up the elevator that they were going to go down, anticipating that they might already be walking, which they were. So the chief of protocol is in front by about 10 feet, and he comes up to me and says, Shelby, we've had to change a plan. And I said, we're going to the Treasury Department, and we're splitting the motorcade. He goes, yeah, how did you know that? I said, I've been talking to your people. We're good. It's all ready to go. And he was like shocked because he'd been sitting in the lunch, right? So he didn't know that all of this stuff was shuffling around behind the scenes. But if we didn't have the organizational structure and the plan in the first place, it would have been a lot harder to shift that plan and make it smooth. So that was kind of a proud moment for me because I was kind of on my own. I was the old kid in the new block. Right. And I was able to sort of say, look, we got you.
No, that's awesome. And I know with a lot of business operating systems, we have a 2-page business plan, which is great and definitely needed. I get bored with it because it is kind of a linear kind of a thing. And so I have a nonprofit called I Matter for Kids. And so when I explain it to people, they're kind of like, oh, cool. But then when I show them the vision board, people are like, oh, you have it all figured out. I'm like, I don't, but I just have a vision for it. Yes. But again, if we don't have a plan, too often I tell people and I take action and I'm like, why aren't you keeping up? So to have a plan, you can definitely adapt to it, obviously. So Yeah, I think slowing down has been a key thing for me that I'm still learning, and let people catch up and whatnot. That's great. I
Well,
love your
we
story.
have a friend that an EO member, longtime EO member named Brian Scudamore, who started 1-800-GOT-JUNK.
Yep.
And
Yep.
he and Cameron Harold and Dan Leonello were early on in a forum together. And Cameron went and wrote another book that he called it, I'm just blanking on what he called it. Sorry, Cameron. But they came up with this thing. Brian talked about this thing called the painted picture. And so
Right.
Dan Leonello trains to the painted picture, and Cameron wrote a book about it, called it something else. But it's definitely the same idea, to look into the future, paint the picture, and then you can adjust as you go. It doesn't mean it's set in stone. In fact, for a visionary, it's like quite often not set in stone because we see something else. And that's been,
Right.
I think, one of our biggest challenges, either both within ourselves and
Right.
then within other people in our own teams, is we can appear scattered, we can appear ungrounded because we're constantly looking, and we can see we might need to pivot. The big issue for us is determining whether something is really a turn in the road, a fork that we need to take, or a squirrel.
Right. Yep. No, that's great. Yeah. And to have a place for me to vent that I think we need to change. So if it's up here, it's going to drive me crazy. And if I make a change without talking about it, then that's not the answer either. So to have an integrator or a fellow visionary to say, here's what I'm thinking, and have someone say, okay, take a deep breath. And when I get it out of my head, I find I can help discern whether it makes sense or not. But if it's up here, I go crazy. That's very.
And an integrator, the real matching, I think this is always the push and pull when you have the visionary, the forward-thinking personality, and you've got the very pragmatic, what I call rows and columns person. Like,
Right.
think accountants would be a good example of that. Lawyers, people who are very linear, and we need them so bad.
Yes, definitely.
But those two worlds don't like to be together very often, and yet they need each other.
Yeah, it's an and. And again, this is where it comes back to your civil thing. I used to be like, oh, they just don't get it. And it's like, okay, slow down and listen. And I'm realizing, even in speaking with you over the last few months, that I think I'm very easygoing and good to work for and whatnot. And some people, I haven't been treating them with respect, or I've had judgments around it. So even just to be civil, to say, okay, it's going to take me 3 minutes to hear what Shelby has to say. It may or may not be the right answer, but I'm respecting their opinion and expecting them as humans. So thank you for teaching me as well.
Well, and it's a practice, because I have to continually practice it myself, because I want to rush to the end sometimes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what's one opportunity that you're working on now, that either in your personal or professional life, that's kind of keeping you up at night, that you're like, that you're, whether it be your book or what, so what's something that you're working on now that's an opportunity?
Here's an opportunity for somebody. I don't know if it's for me, but maybe someday, maybe I'll focus on it. I'm highly focused on it right now. I'm very much in the weeds on it, and the pull of the anticipation is always very present, because I'm always trying to anticipate the next move, which is aging parents and anticipating their needs. It's very, very present and prescient for me right now, because
Me too.
Yeah. And I have two parents who I love dearly, who live around the corner. I literally live, 200 yards from them now. And the idea that I can't be there every single minute of the day, nor should I be. I need to live my life too. So that's sort of the balancing. That's a heart-wrenching balancing act, as to, I'm sure they would love to have me there every day. And I try to be there very often, but I also have a life to live that they gave me. Thank you. And
they would want you to live it, I'm sure. Right.
And so that's a big. And so how we treat our elderly, valuable members of society, and they're sort of discarded, that's sad to me. And you look at other societies that really cherish the wisdom of the elders, is really important, and how we can help people age with dignity and have the care they need. So that's still a huge issue, because we're all getting older. So the younger people listening to this, you're going to be there if you're lucky. And I hope that we continue to iterate on how we care for our elderly people, and come up with brilliant new ideas, and use the technology that's out there to make that part of their lives better. And we'll all be better for it, for sure. Aging with grace and dignity is where I'm focused right now. But also there's the interesting things that are out there about the longevity and wellness that we can, maybe we will live to 100, but we could, but your children could live to 150. Now that's a whole podcast in and of itself as to whether that's good or bad or right or wrong, or if we have the infrastructure and the ability to support that. But it's amazing. It's an amazing subject. And that keeps me awake at night for sure.
No, thank you for sharing that. And as you know, my mom's 93. We just put her into assisted living. And yet I'm spending more time with her, not about taking care of her, kind of engaging her mind and playing. So taking her to bingo and playing crossword. And when she gets rolling, she's amazing. But her memory definitely is going. I've been spending more and more time with her. And instead of like, oh, I have to go see my mom, I get to go see my mom. I mean, how many people get to, spend this much time with them? And so anyways, that's a hot topic for us and a lot of people. Interesting. Yeah, sure. And it's gotten even Cheryl and I, my wife and I, thinking about, okay, we're going through all of my mom's stuff, and I wish we would have asked 10 years ago and to hear the story and the history and get rid of some of that stuff because we don't even know. So we have all this stuff in storage. We're like, I think we're going to actually go through it soon.
I mean, thank you for your children because I don't have children. So I look at it, I have my cup, my favorite,
right.
My auntie. That I have a niece and two nephews and lots of children in my life who I love. I have about probably 10 kids that are now adults, that are people that I adore and think of as children in one way or the other. I don't want them to have to deal with my garage full of stuff.
Right.
And whatever I leave behind, I want it to be organized, and then they can make the decision of what they want to do with it. But it's a long drawn out process because it's not fun to do all day, every day either. No,
I appreciate that. So something to think about. So I have one more question, but anything else that you want to either ask me or share to other visionaries? This has been a wonderful conversation. You're amazing.
Oh my gosh, you know what? I'm just human. I'm just a normal human being who's trying to get through this life, and I try to have a good outlook on it. I had have amazing parents who who gave me the latitude to dream and yet taught me a lot of practical things too at the same time. But they didn't squelch the dream. They just helped guide it a little bit. And they told me early on I could do whatever I wanted to do if I put my mind to it.
Right. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, my parents, my dad passed away 12 years ago, and my mom, they used to say, we don't really know what you do, but you seem happy, so we're happy. It's awesome. So my last question is our theme for our rally cry for the Visionary Forum, and the name of this podcast is Viva La Visionary. So what does Viva La Visionary mean to you, Shelby?
Well, Viva means live and life and celebration and all those kinds of things. And one of my big themes in life is joy. My middle name is Joy.
That's right.
And so I've tried to embrace that gift that was given to me in my name, and I've tried to embrace it in everything I take on. And I try, those are the days when I'm down, is I try to say, live your life, live a good life, bring joy to the world, and you will be joyful and kind. It's right. What you give, you get. So instead of trying to take, just put it out there and it'll come back to you.
Love it. Thank you for that. And thank you for your wisdom, your time, and your friendship. I appreciate you, and excited where this journey is taking each of us individually and together. It's very cool.
Thank you.
All right, Shelby. Thank you. All right. Have a great day.
You
All
too.
Right, bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to Viva La Visionary. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and found inspiration in our guest stories. If you loved what you heard, please subscribe, rate, and share the podcast with fellow dreamers and doers. Join us next time as we continue to explore the limitless possibilities of visionary thinking. Until then, keep dreaming big and taking action. Your vision matters.